Any problem on Earth can be solved with the careful application of high explosives. The trick is not to be around when they go off. We are the Spy-Fi guys, and this is Valkryie.
Welcome back to the Spy-Fi Guys, where we cover spy fact, spy fiction, and everything in between. Today we are closer to the spy fact to the side of the aisle, with the Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie, based on an incredible true story.
Yes, starring your favorite actor, Tom Cruise. That must feel
Well,
pretty good, huh?
I mean, I guess, like I said before, it's a tie between him and Daniel Craig and Chris Evans, but yes, he is one of my favorite actors, and I do enjoy his movies a lot, and so I am excited to talk about this movie.
Isn't this generally considered to be one of his best movies? Maybe
Actually,
not.
no. I mean, I like him in this, and I also like this movie. But general opinion of this movie is not very good.
Well, I think it's awesome.
Oh,
Mostly
I do
because
too. Yeah.
it's well, you know me, I like the true stuff more than Mission Impossible, which is very clearly fictional.
Or so you think.
Or so we claim, or so as far as anybody knows. And Tom Cruise ain't talking. So, if you're not familiar with this movie, it is a classic from when it came out. I remember seeing trailers from when it came out in 2008, and it's not too long, and it's pretty. Not to give away our reviews, but I think we both think it's pretty solid.
Yeah. So this came out in 2008. It was directed by Bryan Singer, and it stars Tom Cruise, Bill Nighy, Chris Van Houten, and a number of other English actors as well.
Yeah, as I described it on our Microdot episode, which if you haven't listened to, you should. It's just a stream of white guys as far as the eye can see. And if you have a problem telling the characters apart, you're not alone. So here is the IMDb plot summary before we jump into the movie. A dramatization of the July 20th, 1944 assassination and political coup plot by desperate renegade German army officers against Adolf Hitler during World War II. Which I think pretty well covers it. What I like about this movie is how condensed it is. It's like 2 locations, 1 week, and then that's it.
Yeah, so this movie starts off, if we want to get right into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so it starts off with something that you usually don't like in a movie, the based on a true story.
Well, here's the thing. I don't like it when it's obviously fake.
All right.
It's obviously fiction. So I think we actually talked about this when we did the Red Sea Diving Resort, which is when it's a horror movie and it says based on a true story, everybody laughs. But this, I didn't mind it here because it very clearly is based on a true story. I actually, sort of to jump ahead to spy fact versus fiction, if I made it, I would have just said a true story.
Maybe. Well, we can jump ahead to that. Well, we can talk about more once we get there, because I got a few things about spy fact or spy fiction that I want to talk about too.
Sounds good. So after we see the based on the true story credit, we get the oath taken by German officers in the Wehrmacht that they will serve Hitler.
Yep.
And the significance of this is that a lot of German officers, when they considered overthrowing Hitler, refused to, claiming it was because they didn't want to break their word.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because millions of people are dying and that doesn't constitute a good reason. But I think it was probably more a nice little excuse not to get involved and not to risk their lives.
Right. So, movie starts with Colonel Stauffenberg, played by Tom Cruise, now writing in his journal or his diary, and it does a nice, a nice Red October style transition from him speaking in German to him speaking English. Although it's not as neat as the one in Red October, it's not like it centers on a single word that causes a transition. Well, it just sort of overlaps.
Yeah, I didn't realize The Hunt for Red October was only the first movie to do that. I thought it was the only one.
Now, since then, a lot of people, come to the same conclusion that, okay, I can't have them speaking in, whatever language this whole time, so they need to find a way to transition, or they can just have them, talk it with accents right off the bat. Although, this film is notable for, not having having none of the non-German actors not do accents.
There's something they like to have Germans do in movies is speak with a British accent, because that makes sense. Well, this actually ties into one of my larger pet peeves that I think I've spoken to you about, which is I don't like when movie directors treat their audiences like they're dumb.
You think this? What do you mean?
Well, this is not an example of that.
Oh, okay. All right. I was gonna say this of all movies definitely doesn't treat them like they're dumb.
But what I'm saying is, if you have a movie, it's in Berlin, it's in World War II, everyone is clearly part of the German army, and you have them speaking English, I think people will understand that they actually spoke German then, because it's an American movie for American audiences, that's why they're speaking English.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they needed to explain that, though I do think it was cool that they did.
Yeah.
That's all.
So as we start the film, Stauffenberg's already showing dissent in letters, and he apparently got sent to North Africa as punishment for speaking out.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he's there, he meets talking with another general who's there, who's played by Bernard Hill, who is notable for being the captain of the Titanic and also King Theoden from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right, I didn't recognize him either. I think because he didn't have a beard, so I'm like, and that's just his trademark.
Yeah, he didn't have the very, very distinctive Theoden beard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I haven't seen Titanic, so.
What?
Yeah, I think we talked about
that.
Yeah, I know. Everyone loved it in middle school, but I was like, it's too long.
And yet you watched The Lord of the Rings.
Well, The Lord of the Rings is different. Come on, that was practically made for me.
And Stauffenberg is, talking with this general and trying to reroute his troops so that they can survive, basically. And while they're talking, they get attacked by a bunch of P-40s.
Yes, and this scene was in all the trailers because it's the most action in the whole movie.
And then there's also, so as the shooting gets, he doesn't get hit first. He ducks down, he gets knocked over, and there's a scene in this has been memeified because it looks like Tom Cruise has like padding in his butt or something, and it was a whole controversy. All right, did he wear pads? Did he not wear pads? He said he didn't wear pads. That's just actually his butt. Yeah, it's a whole thing.
I didn't even notice his butt.
Yeah, well, because I knew about this. That's what I was like. Looks like there's some padding there, but it's just could be so that when he gets thrown back from the explosion, he doesn't hurt himself.
I looked up Tom Cruise butt Valkryie.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
Maybe he just does a lot of squats.
I think it might have been photoshopped, some of these that I'm looking at. You can't believe anything the internet says.
True. Anyway, so moving off of that. So he gets into a truck and he's, brings a wounded soldier, trying to, get him to safety. Mm-hmm. And the truck gets hit, it explodes. And then we cut to, people waiting for a plane on a runway. And you see Kenneth Branagh who was playing Trescow, who's part of we find out is part of the resistance. Yes.
So just one last thing. Tom Cruise gets hit and then he's lying in the sand and he definitely looks like he's dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, it's not Scream, it's not Psycho, but that would have been a twist. So it cuts to Trescow doing his own plot to kill Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
As it is revealed.
Yes, he has a bomb hidden in a bottle of Cointreau, and he gives a bomb to Colonel Brandt, who is played by Tom Hollander.
Are we supposed to know who Tom Hollander is? Because I don't know who he was.
I only know it because there's a running joke on the Empire Movie Podcast that there are like 4 different actors named Tom Holland, and then throw in Tom Hollander as well.
Is the Empire Movie Podcast about the show Empire?
No, it is from the people who make the film magazine Empire. So, but a lot of movies.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, but that's why I know who Tom. Well, also Tom Hollander is. He's in a few other things. He's actually in one of the Mission Impossibles, Rogue Nation, playing the Prime Minister.
Okay, we'll have to watch out for him.
But yeah, so he gives a bottle to Brandt on the plane, and the Trescow. Well, and Hitler's on this plane, so he's trying to, blow the plane so that they can kill Hitler. And Trescow and his assistant are waiting to hear news of the plane. Uh-huh. And apparently it landed, and the bomb did not go off.
Right.
Now, fun fact, Treskow's assistant is actually played by Stauffenberg's grandson.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yep,
So Trescow is like, the bomb didn't go off. So then he realizes that they have to take it back before they open the bottle of liquor and realize that it's not liquor inside, but a bomb.
Mm-hmm. And so I didn't realize that Hitler didn't drink. That is something I didn't know.
See, I knew that, but I didn't make the connection.
Yeah.
But also, it's like, okay, maybe if he wasn't going to drink it, I'm sure he'd find somebody to take it.
Right. Yeah, so...
It's the thought that counts. So Trescow sends his aide on the next plane to get it back. He's like, I gave you the wrong one. I gave you the bad one. I'm going to give you the real one.
And when Trescow gets to Berlin, he's talking with Bill Nye, who plays General Ulbricht.
Mm-hmm.
And Ulbricht is like being panicked and he's saying, we've been discovered. And it's like, again, this is one of my pet peeves. Talking about things that are supposed to be confidential, just in, where any other people... And sure, he's whispering, but it's still... Anyone could hear you.
Dude, it's like, when your life's on the line, don't whisper. Just don't say anything. Also, because if they had discovered them, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Yeah. So why even bring it up? Also, in this scene, they talk about a general named Blazkowicz, which, for those of you who are into your video games, may recognize B.J. Blazkowicz, the lead character in Wolfenstein.
Oh, hey.
I assume it's related. I didn't bother to double check. Anyway, carry on.
Okay, so when Trescow meets with Brandt, he's hinting that he knows what's going on or knows something's up.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets the bottle back, and they find Ulbricht tells Trescow that one of their team, Oster, was arrested by the Gestapo, and they need a replacement.
So what I liked about the scene with Brandt was that it set the stage of, as we talked about in the Microdot episode, how a totalitarian regime is not a great place to be, even if you're part of it, because everybody's constantly looking over their shoulder. Everyone's backstabbing each other. The wrong word, the wrong time can get you killed or sent to prison. So even if Brandt didn't know what was going on, it set the tone that this is a place where you can't trust anybody, that there's always a conspiracy going on. Especially now, especially late in the war, when there's already been a bunch of attempts on Hitler's life.
Right. And so next we go to Countess von Stauffenberg, who's played by Carice van Houten, who you may recognize as Lady Melisandre from Game of Thrones.
I did not reckon. I'm not too good at recognizing actors. I have an aunt who's really good at recognizing Star Trek actors underneath alien makeup. Now that is impressive.
That's a talent, yeah. Well, anyway, so she goes into the hospital and she sees her husband, Stauffenberg. So he's lost an eye, his right eye? Think about that for a second.
I think his right eye, yeah.
His right eye, his right arm, and 2 fingers from his left arm. Or his left hand, rather.
Well, I think he lost his right hand.
Right hand. Sorry,
I don't think he had an artificial arm.
That's right.
So he's like totally messed up, and he asks, "What about his family?" Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a scene where he's recovered and he's talking to Ulbricht in this church that's been like bombed out. And I
liked how this was framed, because the way he starts, it sounds like he's at confession.
Mm-hmm.
And then they pull back to reveal he's talking with Ulbricht, and he's being invited into the resistance. And when he says, if you're interested, you know where to find us.
Which I guess he did.
Yeah. So he goes to the house where they're meeting, and you have Terrence Stamp, who plays General Beck, and who's part of the seemingly like the head of the resistance.
Yeah. As close to the leader as you'd expect, though he doesn't do that much talking.
Yeah, and then so part of the plan is also, when they succeed, Godler is going to be the chancellor, who's another in a sea of white people, but German names. But
there are just so many characters.
There are
this many characters.
It's accurate.
Well, this is sort of the main thing, that when you adapt a real life story to movies and TV shows, that's the main thing that gets changed, is cutting down the number of people.
True.
And in this case, I think they were justified in doing that. I'm sure they did it at least a little bit.
They did, yeah.
Okay, so Stauffenberg meets these conspirators and they're all arguing about how to kill Hitler, when to do it, how to do it, and so on.
Yeah, so what's his name? Godler is sort of favoring more of a political option rather than a military coup. He wants to confront Hitler openly, and Stauffenberg realizes that the soldiers' oaths, which we mentioned at the top, will not allow them to do so. And also, if you get rid of Hitler, you still have Himmler and Goebbels and the SS.
I mean, yeah. And it's like, how would you get rid of Hitler anyway? It's not like you just take it lying down. He was called a dictator for a reason.
Well, yeah, so he leaves the meeting and is like, this isn't going to work.
He says he'll only do it if there's a chance of success.
All right. So he goes and sees his family for the first time, and as his kids are playing Die Valkryie by Wagner, excuse me, plays on a record, and as it's playing, this house starts to shake, and they take shelter in the basement because of a bombing raid, and there's this really cool shot of the record player, so it skips when they get hit the first time and goes up, and the needle goes off, and then when there's another shake, it skips back on, and you get the very dun 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 dun.
I also noticed in this part that his kids, Stauffenberg's kids, were playing at Soldier.
Well, it seems like two of them were playing at like nights, and one of them was wearing his hat and giving a salute and playing at Soldier. Yeah,
right.
But yeah, so that was also realizing, all right, that if I continue with this, my kids, he's just thinking about the effects of this all. Either way, this will have on his kids and his family.
Yeah, I mean it's a pivotal moment in history, one way or the other.
And so
I don't think that the movie implies that listening to the record gave him the idea for Valkryie.
Oh, I think it was. I think the movie implies that because it's
really?
it is Valkryie. That is the music.
Oh, I thought it was just a coincidence.
No, and then you see him as he's hearing it, and his eyes just sort of, his one eye, just sort of lights up. He's like, "Oh, this is it. This is what we need to do."
Okay, so what's the plan, Christian? Tell us the plan.
He realizes that the key to everything is Operation Valkryie. Now, Operation Valkryie is Hitler's contingency plan to contain a civil disruption using the reserve army. So they realize that if they kill Hitler and make it look like the SS is staging a coup, they can use Operation Valkryie to take control.
So just a little bit more about that. The reason why they needed the plan was they had all of these slave workers imported in from these occupied countries, people like Ukrainians, like Slavs, like Russians, and the German government moved them in to work in the factories because they wouldn't let women work in factories. So they'd rather have potential traitors who would sabotage all their shit than let women do it.
Ow.
Hitler personally approved of the plan, and when we say the reserve army, it involves groups of soldiers who happen to be in the area, which includes trainees, soldiers on leave, guards at POW camps.
Oh, wow. I did not know all that.
Yeah, so that's what they were working with. But as they explain in the movie, it's an extremely risky plan because you tell the soldiers to go, but they think they're still fighting for Hitler when they aren't.
Exactly, yeah.
So they have to trick them into helping them overthrow their own government. Yeah.
And then part of the trick to this also is that they need to rewrite Operation Valkryie so that it excludes the SS in the chain of command. And
so they have to get Hitler to sign it and just hope that he won't notice the part about the SS, which admittedly it looks really long and he probably doesn't have time to read it, but someone might have and might tell him.
So, and they also need to get General Fromm, who's played by Tom Wilkinson, who's the head of the reserve army, to agree to make these changes and also just to go with it since, the reserve army is crucial.
Yeah, he's the head of the reserve army. So if it's going to work, he has to at least let them do it, even if he
Right.
isn't involved himself. So they go and speak to him, and they tempt him, speaking in like coded language.
Which I like that. That was really clever how Stauffenberg was doing that.
I mean, that's total spy movie stuff, right?
Mhm.
That's exactly why we're here.
And so they code it, or so in code, they basically offer him the role of the supreme military commander.
Mm-hmm.
And he states that, he always comes down on the right side. And as long as the Fuhrer is alive, you know what side that is.
Oh, yeah. So he's saying, I might do it if you kill him.
If you kill Hitler.
It's not a no, but it's not a yes.
Uh-huh. And so on our next cut to a nightclub where, you have a lot of German soldiers or German officers and women, relaxing, having fun. And you have Eddie Izzard. Did you recognize that as Eddie Izzard?
I think I did, yeah.
Okay, I
He's
did
a
not.
very
That was
distinctive look. I had also just seen him in Mystery Man.
there you go. So he plays Felgebel, and he's drinking. He notices something's in his drink, so he goes into the bathroom and tosses in the sink, and it's a glass eye.
Hey, it's like his calling card. He's like James Bond.
So Stauffenberg's in the bathroom and says, basically says that there's no success without him, and that this is happening, and that we need you to do this. And Felgebel's not having. He says, "You're rats jumping from a sinking ship, and you're all traitors, and you'll be if the SS catches you, you'll all be brutally murdered."
Which of course is all
yeah.
correct.
Yeah. And so it seems like he wasn't really. So Stauffenberg mentioned that he, came to him previously, which we didn't see.
Nope.
But it looks like he's more. If we go through the, reasons that people will spy for someone or do something, money, ideology, coercion, and ego. This seems more like coercion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's very physical with them.
Yeah.
I sort of felt.
So at this point, we don't know what Felgebel actually does, so we're not sure what plot he's going to play in the operation.
Yeah, I know. It all will be revealed.
Yeah.
So foreshadowing.
So they're rewriting the Valkryie orders, and they want it so that it takes 3 hours rather than 6, which is what Hitler planned, to seize control of the government. So rather than try to, spread out all their resources across all of Germany and the occupied territories, they focus on Berlin because everyone will take orders from Berlin.
Theoretically, anyway.
Yeah. And so at this point, we find out the Tresco has been transferred to the front, and now Stauffenberg's in charge of the military wing of the operation.
Yeah. He was also I think around now in real life he was made chief of staff of the reserve army.
Yeah.
Which
and this is when
he didn't want to do it, but it got him closer to Hitler, which of course is exactly what they needed.
And this is when Ulbricht says that you played the part of a bureaucrat so well.
Which of course he was in real life. He served as a logistics and administrative officer his whole career. We talked about that on the Microdot episode. Check it out if you haven't listened to it.
So at this point, Stauffenberg also gets a new assistant, Haften. And, he's basically openly says, he's recruiting him and says, you know how this war will end? And he's pointing to a portrait of Hitler. The portrait will be hung and the man will be hung.
Which is pretty gutsy. Not that he said it, but that he said it to this guy that we as an audience don't know. Maybe in real life he knew him and knew that he wouldn't just immediately turn him in if he started talking about treason in front of him.
Well, Ulbricht did say he comes highly recommended. So it's like, okay, that means he will be loyal to you and loyal to this cause.
Okay.
But he also said, he literally says, I'm engaged in high treason with all means available to me. Can I count you in?
Hell yeah, Stauffenberg. Count me in.
So they've got rewritten Valkyrie, but now they need Hitler's signature for the updated Valkyrie plan. So Stauffenberg goes to see Hitler in his office, and he's there to report on using the reserve army to assist with repelling the invasion. Which invasion, you ask? Oh, just a little thing called Normandy.
Yep. Which goes to show it establishes where we are in history and also the stakes that Germany is losing and that the days of Hitler's regime are numbered.
Well, except at this point, I think they're still in disbelief about Normandy.
Well, the characters may not know that, but the audience does.
That's true. Yeah. So, no, the characters. I mean, there's even I don't remember which official Hitler says. Oh, it's well in hand.
Yeah. Well, they would say that, wouldn't they?
Yeah. But it's also, and this is something we could talk about another episode. I'm trying to think if there's any movie that actually covers, the immense tactic that the Allies used to sort of fool everyone that the invasion was not coming at Normandy but somewhere else, and it took them a long time for them to actually realize it was coming in Normandy.
I'm sure we'll come up with something.
Yeah. Anyways.
Okay, so they go to get Hitler's signature, and what I have from this scene is there's a part. So first of all, Goring is there, and Goring was the head of the Luftwaffe.
Oh, cool.
And because I knew I recognized his name.
Right, I've heard the name. I didn't off the top of my head know. Okay, what was he in the Nazi, high command?
Yeah, and I think Goebbels was there too. He's like the kind of wormy looking guy.
Yeah, Goebbels was the minister of propaganda, basically.
Yeah. So at one point, somebody says to Fromm, "Oh, can you have fresh tea brought in?"
Yeah, so he's really belittled by the high command and inner circle, and that's seemingly why he's going along with this plan, despite he doesn't want to know what the plan is, but it's like, but if Goering was to find himself without a seat, I would be most pleased, or something like that.
Well, he's a good example of what they call a disgruntled underling. It's
Exactly.
a really good way to get betrayed or spied on.
Yes. So next we have, if this was a James Bond movie, this would be the Q scene. And appropriately enough, the person giving the briefing's name starts with the letter Q as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this is Kernheim who's giving the briefing, and this is where the quote that started our episode came from.
Nice job with all these German names, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wrote them down because I'm just like, well, some of these, like, with the actors we know, we can do that, but the actors like I've never seen before, I'm gonna have no idea who that is. So I'd be just saying, oh, that guy, and so try to write them down and make sure we know what we're talking about.
Well, that's good. You see him as a character first.
Yeah. So they're going to be using plastic explosives, and they use British time pencils as the detonator for the explosives. Should be about 30 minutes, but with the heat in the Wolf's Lair, would be more like 10 to 15. Not
much time.
No. And so, someone, I think it's Beck who asks, that's not very, says that, or it's either Beck or Ulbricht who says it's not very precise. And, Kernheim's like, you can have small or precise, but not both.
Hey, that's the nature of the spy work.
Yeah.
Of course, James Bond is always precise. That's the difference between real life and fiction. Also, I think in this scene, somebody says, "Don't proceed unless you can get Himmler too."
Exactly.
Himmler was the leader of the SS, and definitely someone who would have taken Hitler's place if Hitler had been killed. So
yeah, they even say, at one point they say, why kill a dictator when a maniac will replace him?
Well, I mean, you could say Hitler is a maniac too.
Yeah, it's true.
Also, somebody says, quote, "It's a military operation. Nothing ever goes according to plan."
It's a good quote. That's Beck who says that. And
speaking of good quotes, here's another one I like from Eisenhower, which is a similar one that I remember, which is, "No plan survives contact with the enemy."
Yep, that's a good one.
It's very true.
Yeah. So we jump to Stauffenberg, who's seeing his family, and seemingly he's told his wife about the plot, and they agree that she'll take the children away to Bamberg. And at this point, they hint strongly that Nina's pregnant.
Right.
And that child is actually the mother of the actor who plays Treskow's assistant.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and then we go to what did you said, 15?
July 15th, yes, where they a canceled attempt.
Yes. So there's a meeting scheduled for that day, and they're going to attempt the plan then. And everyone in the operation gets a nifty card that allows them in and out of Berlin while Operation Valkyrie is in effect.
And they give it to all the members of the conspiracy so that they can move around while everyone who's on the conspiracy will be stopped by the soldiers.
Yeah. So Ulbricht sends out the standby order for the reserve army, and Remmer, who's one of the commanders of the reserve army, I think at this point he gets it while he's swimming, and he gets the order. And he's like, "I hope this is not a drill."
I love that guy. That guy's hilarious. He's like so put upon.
He is. So if you don't remember the actor's name off the top of my head, but he does play a role in Age of Ultron. He is. What's the?
This is going to be a deep cut if it's Age of Ultron and he's not one of the Avengers.
Yeah, well, he's the Hydra leader who they're fighting in the beginning, who's actually a famous leader from the comics that I'm not remembering what his name is off the top of my head.
It's probably like Baron Fisher Valkryie. I hope this guy isn't typecast as Nazis, though, between this one and Age of Ultron.
He kind of was, because he also played a role in... What's that movie about Hitler that all that meme comes from with the
Downfall. That's a great movie.
He's in Downfall as well.
Yep. So there you go. But yeah, he's hilarious. He's like, "Oh, what do you mean I have to stop swimming and actually like do my job in this like swimming pool that has a swastika on the bottom?"
Yeah.
Can you imagine having to build that for the movie?
Well, that's one of the things I read about this movie and also heard about is that they had to put up because in Germany you really can't. And a lot of this movie was filmed in Germany. You can't openly display the swastika anywhere, and I mean, really, that's fair. But they had to put up all these notices saying, they were doing filming for a movie. And,
don't call the police.
Yes, but of course, someone still did.
Oh man! So they mobilize the army. They think it's a drill, but now they have to get into the wolf's lair past all of these guards.
Yeah. So Stauffenberg arrives in the wolf's lair. He puts his glass eye in for the meeting. And his bag is placed under the table.
Yes.
And then Hitler arrives, but Himmler's not there. So Stauffenberg goes to the phone, he calls Ulbricht and Beck, and says that he wants to proceed. And Beck and the council say no, but Kornheim says, you go for it anyways. But during this time, Hitler has already left the meeting, and it's over. And so Stauffenberg is, looking for his bag, and his assistant's like, I don't know where it was. Like, I don't know where it is, but someone else grabbed it for him, thinking they were being nice, since he's missing a hand and some fingers. So I'm going to help him out. And it's at this point, the reserve army is told to stand down, that it was just a drill, and Remmer is pissed.
Well, actually, one last thing about this scene in the wolf's lair is that Valkybell.
Oh, yes, we see him.
We see what his job is, which is he's in charge of communications at the wolf's lair.
Exactly.
And when the bomb goes off, his job is to cut all of the communications. And I don't know what he told his guys, but okay.
Yeah. They abort the attempt because, Hitler left quickly and there wasn't really any chance to do anything.
And by the way, this scene shows why it's so important to have command and control in military operations, which is when you spend time bickering about what to do and not knowing what to do and talking to people and getting permission from the higher ups, your opportunity sometimes is gone. And this is one example of that. So they go back and see Fromm. He's really mad.
So he's pissed that they activated the reserve army without his knowledge. And
it's not just pissed, he's probably scared that if they had found out about it, he could have been in deep, deep trouble.
Yep, and they could have implicated him, but just by omission, really.
Yes. So if they do it again, if they mobilize the army again, one way or the other, it's going to have to be full speed ahead. So then we get the scene where they're walking out the door, and Fromm says to Tom Cruise, "I'll hear you say it," referring to the Heil Hitler.
Yep.
Which he does, but with his missing hand.
Yep.
Quite the visual.
It was a very dramatic scene, and that's one of the things I appreciated. Is they didn't linger on the fact you show that you wouldn't see his hand, but then but they never really lingered on it grotesquely. But then you use it for great effect in that one scene.
It's like, oh yeah, you might almost forget that he's missing a hand by this point.
Yeah. So there's a meeting of the resistance, and we find out that Gordler has a warrant for his arrest by the SS, and Stauffenberg is given full discretion now. which is it's really convenient because at this point Gordler was like arguing that you and your henchmen tried to do it anyways, even though we didn't. We said no. So it's convenient for Stauffenberg, but also not great for Gordler.
Well, I guess as long as they keep it moving and stop the aforementioned bickering and inability to make a decision.
Yeah. So Stauffenberg gets a call from his wife, but then is disconnected by a bombing in some place between the cities. It's a connection place. And he was told, this place is very far from Bamberg, so I'm sure your family's okay.
You never know, though. It's not like they had cell phones back then where you could just pick up the phone and get through. Actually, he does try to get through later, but we'll get there.
So, and then we jump to the 20th of July.
Day of days.
And you see Stauffenberg shaving, and you see, and this is, again, like talking about using things for dramatic effect. This is the only time you really see his sort of empty eye socket.
Yeah, that was great, though.
Yeah.
I also, when it's like I hate this in movies. No. Whenever it shows a character shaving, they're going to cut themselves because, like, why else would they do it?
Yeah, well, no. Skyfall, James Bond is getting shaved and does not cut himself.
Well, why was he shaving?
I don't really know. It was just, it was to show sort of, well, we'll talk about that when we talk about Skyfall, but it was to show sort of rebirth in a way.
Yeah, that's one of two reasons why you have a character shave, is they're either shaving off all their hair to become reborn, or they're going to cut themselves and it's so cringy to look at.
Yeah, but this time it is intentional. He's intentionally cutting himself.
Oh, that makes it even worse.
So that when he nicks himself and causes a small blood stain, so that which gets on his uniform. And so Stauffenberg and his assistant arrive at the Wolf's Lair, and he asks the major that greets him for a place to change his shirt. Shows him that I cut myself, so can I change?
Good thing you had another shirt.
Yeah,
people always travel around with extra shirts.
So Ulbricht and Kernheim are in Berlin, and they haven't put the reserve army on standby yet because they're afraid of pissing off. Well, Ulbricht is afraid of pissing off Fromm again.
Yeah, which makes sense.
And this is one of the things. It's like, all right, if he had acted sooner, they could have gotten away with it.
Yes, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so in the bathroom, he says, Tom Cruise, Stauffenberg says, I need to change my shirt, but actually they're prepping the case to explode. So him and his assistant from before, his trusty sidekick, are working on it.
And they also find out that the meeting has been moved up to 12:30. Apparently Mussolini is arriving and Hitler's having lunch with him. And so Stauffenberg's like, will Mussolini be attending the briefing too? He's like, well, if we can get Mussolini as well, what? That'd be so great.
Yeah,
but he's like, no,
don't get greedy or anything. It also says that they moved from the bunker to this like room that actually has windows.
Yeah, so they moved from the bunker to the conference hut because it's too hot to have it in the bunker.
Yeah.
And so as Stauffenberg's changing, his assistants, sort of helping him, but the major who greeted them in the beginning is like saying, they're starting the briefing, and like even opens a door while they're trying to prep everything, and so they really only have time to arm the one bomb before the major comes in.
Yeah, and isn't the guy interrupting them Brandt from before?
No, it's not.
He is in this part though.
He is. Yeah. So the major escorts Stauffenberg to the conference hut, and he puts his briefcase under the table, and he moves. He sort of moves it so it's on the other side, on the side of the table leg, closer to Hitler. And right next to him is Brandt from the beginning.
Yes, and Hitler gives Stauffenberg a look because, of course, he's met him before.
Right. And so Stauffenberg gets the phone call from him, for him, that he had mentioned to the major saying, I'm expecting an important phone call. Get me even if I'm with the Fuhrer.
This is like when you're on a date and you have one of your friends call you so that you have a reason to leave if it's not going well. I mean, I've never done that.
I've also never done that, but I've heard of that.
Yes, it's a really good idea. All right. Anyway, so he leaves, and then his briefcase gets knocked over at one point.
Yeah, so not just knocked over. It's knocked over because Hitler's mad, And I couldn't help but thinking about that the thing which has been memeified of Hitler shouting and pounding on the table.
Well, memes have their origin in real life. I bet he did it all
Yeah.
the time.
So it gets knocked over because he's pounding on the table because he hears something that's upsetting him. And when it gets knocked over, Brandt, picks it up and stands it up, but puts it on the opposite side of that table leg, away from Hitler.
Yep. And that probably is what saved Hitler's life.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe.
Well,
who could say?
one of a few things. I mean, also moving it to the conference hut definitely saved him.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. I think they even say that at one point, that a bomb of any size in the bunker would have killed everybody inside.
Exactly.
So Tom gets out of there, leaving his hat and his gun behind.
Yes, and his belt.
Well, yeah, his belt with his gun. He's
Right.
out of there. Hurry up.
Stauffenberg, as he's making his way to the car, the bomb explodes, and Stauffenberg drives away and tells the driver, I have orders from the Fuhrer. Go.
Let me put my sunglasses on as we drive away from that explosion.
So Feldjebel, who calls Ulbricht, tells him that that the Fuhrer is dead, and then Feldjebel severs all the lines of communication between.
Just like he was supposed to, but then Ulbricht says he can't be sure of what he said, so he doesn't do anything. And in fact, he goes to lunch, which is absurd, of course. So Stauffenberg's on his way out, but then he gets stopped by a gate, and the soldiers guarding the gate, more importantly.
And so he bluffs his way to get through, which I like. I thought that was really cool. As he, goes and calls, who's he call?
He claims that he called like the garrison commander or something like that, but he didn't actually call anybody.
Because he knew that if Feldjebel did his job, all the lines of communication would be cut.
Mm-hmm. And it's the classic spy movie thing where it's like, oh, gee, I bet the Fuhrer wouldn't be too happy to know that you're holding me up here. Mm-hmm. Gee, another problem with an authoritarian regime, which is that everybody's afraid of stepping on the wrong person's toes, so they'll just do whatever you say to avoid causing a problem. So it actually works, and he escapes. And then meanwhile, oh gosh, what's his name? Help me out. The bald guy with the glasses.
It's Kernheim.
Kernheim?
Yes.
Okay. He goes behind Ulbricht's back and gives the order to activate the plan.
Yeah. And so while this is happening, they're still driving in the car. Stauffenberg and Hoften are driving to the plane in the car, and Hoften rather carelessly throws the extra explosives and the pliers out of the car. I mean, yes, you need to get rid of it, but the driver sees it happening. I'm like, come on, you couldn't be a little more, discreet about that?
Well, I mean, what else was he going to do with that?
I don't know. I mean, maybe just drop it casually, or not when the guy's staring right at him.
Yeah, at least have Tom Cruise talk to the driver to distract him or something.
I don't know.
Yeah, or he could lean off the side of the car and slowly drop it, but then it would be in the middle of the road. I don't know.
Right. I don't know.
The Monday morning quarterbacking here, 70 years later.
Right. So, but the order gets put through to mobilize the reserve army, and Remmer, this time he's getting a haircut when he gets the order. He is not pleased, but
it's hilarious. He's the best character.
All right.
He's so put upon. He's in the reserve army. It's not like he actually is doing any fighting, but
that's why he has time to go swimming and get his haircut and a shave.
It's like, dude, your buddies are dying in Russia by the thousands every day. Least you can do is go stand in an open lot every now and then.
Yeah. So Stauffenberg and Hitler arrive back in Berlin, but there's no one there to greet them, so they're wondering what's going on. They call Ulbricht, and at this point, Ulbricht, finds out that Kernheim went behind his back and put out the order, and so he's pissed. And then they get the call, and now Stauffenberg's pissed. He's like, "You didn't do anything. What have you been doing for 3 hours?"
Nothing, of course, is the answer.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, their driver rats them out.
Mm-hmm.
Their driver from the Wolf Slayer. It's like they couldn't find somebody to trust.
No, well, I mean, it's the Wolf Slayer. So how could they, other than having one man on the inside was hard enough, and that was by coercion.
I suppose that's a good point.
Yeah. So at this point, Stauffenberg
they finally activate the plot. They finally get started 3 hours later.
Yeah, so he tells Ulbricht that you need to initiate Valkyrie now. You do it in Fromm's name, and if Fromm's not with us, arrest him.
Which of course they do, and I think they use it. I think Stauffenberg uses a PPK.
Yes, so he does. So which is same as being James Bond's gun. But before he gets arrested, Fromm actually, he meets with Ulbricht and Kernheim, and calls the Wolf's Lair, and he actually gets through. So I'm wondering, how the heck did he get through? At what point did would Felgebel, stop doing his job basically?
It's a good question, and it's probably on the cutting room floor somewhere. But
Yeah,
the thing is, if like Goring or something like walked into
that's
Fegabel's
true. Yeah,
place and was like, "Yo, turn the phones back on," like, what's he gonna do? Of course, he's gonna do it.
he's gonna do it. Yeah, and so he actually gets through to Field Marshal Keitel, and who says that Hitler's still alive, and this is So this is when the driver rats them out and says, and you see him looking, saying that where's your man Stauffenberg? We'd like to talk to him in a ominous
Oh
tone.
boy.
And at this point, Stauffenberg comes into Fromm's office, like, no, Hitler's dead. I saw the explosion. Operation
Yeah.
Valkyrie is in effect.
Yeah, I mean, you saw an explosion. Also, the Berlin police join at this point, and a very unnecessary scene. I felt.
I mean, it sort of helped just to so you realize how this could have happened. So, Fromm, as we said, is arrested, and the War Ministry is sealed off. And General Beck shows up at the office, and he's not in his uniform because they want, he says that they should be seen as a revolution of the people.
Which of course is pretty far from that. But also more to the point is he was going to be a political leader in the new regime, not a military leader. There were other people that were going to do that.
Yeah. And then you have this, which I thought was a very moving scene of the whole resistance, in the War Ministry, and I think it's Kernheim or Ulbricht like takes out his card first and shows, and they all take out their cards to show that they're with him.
I know, it's so great, but also so corny at the same time. But that's what makes it great.
Yeah, so Stauffenberg gives them their orders. He wants confirmation that they have control of the government quarter and that SS command is cleared out. And he makes this great speech that says, I want to make sure that Hitler's Germany has seen its last sunrise.
Yeah, and then I love this part. All the SS guys getting arrested was pretty satisfying to watch.
Oh, yeah.
And also the part where the camera's like low and it shows all the German soldiers like running towards the building with all of the swastikas on it. I thought that was bad. I thought that was like badass. And it's also kind of weird seeing German soldiers doing something cool. Usually they're ones having something cool being done to them.
Yeah.
And then so it all goes, but then there's contradictory orders.
Yeah, so in the communications office, you see apparently they've got two orders, one from Stauffenberg to arrest Goebbels, and one from the Wolf's Lair to arrest Stauffenberg. And, the lower ranking officer is like, which one do we send through? I was like, send them both through. Ours is, we're here to send and communicate orders no matter the content. We're not here to censure things.
In other words, it's not our problem.
Exactly.
Which
works out for the Stauffenberg. If they hadn't done that, this thing would have failed immediately.
Well, it works out for Stauffenberg, but it doesn't work out so well for them, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
So eventually all the orders are going around, and it finally breaks when Hitler speaks to the major on the phone, Major Remmer, when he's going to arrest Goebbels.
Yeah, so I thought this was cool because when you see Goebbels at first, he puts a cyanide capsule in his mouth, so he was this close to being like, we could have been rid of Goebbels.
Yeah, that would have been pretty hilariously ironic death.
All right.
Well, he knew that if the regime really was going down, he'd be first in the gallows. Well, maybe not first.
True. Wow.
But pretty high up there. So
yes.
He knows which side of the bread his bread is buttered on, or however it goes.
Yeah, so Remmer gets the phone call, or gets handed the phone, and Hitler's on there and says that I want you to take these traitors in alive.
Dead or
And then,
alive, but preferably
well,
alive.
alive. He says flat out says, "No, I want them alive."
Bring me the passengers. I want them alive.
I also thought of that.
And then also in that scene, Remmer says to his subordinate, "We are the coup, you idiot." Which is
and
like, why are you taking out on him?
because because he does not like being played.
Yeah, well, maybe he should spend a little less time swimming and a little more time paying attention.
Yeah, and then also at the end of the scene, you see Goebbels take the cyanide out of his mouth. I'm just like, we were just so close to just being rid of him.
He was like ready to go. He
Uh-huh.
had like 1 foot in the grave. So, okay, so Major Remmer's trying to figure out what's going on. He's like, where is and then he meets someone who says, where is General Fromm? And the guy who says that looks a lot like Winston Churchill from this one episode of Doctor Who, season 5.
It could very well be.
I didn't bother to look it up, though.
I mean, yeah.
Actually, keep talking. I'll look it up.
All right. So at this point, also, the communications office, decides that they're going to stop transmissions from Stauffenberg and only send them from the Wolf's Lair. So they realize, all right, there's a coup happening. We need to make sure we're on the right side of this.
Yeah. Well,
and as a result,
the Wolf's Lair is what you want to do because they're loyal to Hitler.
And at this point, the resistance starts losing districts as they are not able to communicate with them.
So it's like things are falling apart. Basically.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so Churchill from Doctor Who is named Ian McNeice.
Okay.
And his character in Valkryie is Pompous General.
Wait, so he doesn't even have a name? He's just Pompous General?
I mean, unless his name is Pompous General, which I doubt.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's like refusing to comply. He's shouting, "The Fuhrer's not dead! The Fuhrer's not dead!" And at this point, Fromm's assistant, who is like a poster child Nazi
of like
soldier.
the Aryan Nazi.
Yeah. So he sees the Pompous General being taken away and sees where Fromm is being held, and you see Fromm just give this little wave.
Yeah, Fromm's been put in a closet with the other loyalists, but he's got his spy inside, the aforementioned young guy.
And so the reserve army gets the order to stand down, and there's that radio broadcast announces that Hitler is still alive, and Stauffenberg is sort of in disbelief. And at this moment, I think it wasn't until this moment that I realized that it wasn't that Stauffenberg was just going through with the plan no matter what. He really thought that Hitler was dead.
But like, I don't understand why he would be so adamantly sure. I mean, yeah,
because he delivered the bomb. The bomb went off, and also, the SS would do that. They would, even if Hitler was dead, they would say that he's still alive. They'd give out propaganda, as like Goebbels would do that.
Well, that's a good point. Also, I think the problem is Stauffenberg hasn't read as many comic books as we have.
This is true, but
so he doesn't know the no body, no death rule.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I guess it didn't click to me until I saw it this time. Where it is, no, he's like adamant, like, no, he's dead. There's no way that he's still alive. And so which I thought was really interesting. Yeah,
must have been a real bad feeling to be like, put it all out there and you failed.
Mm-hmm. And so at this point, Ulbricht, leaves and others start leaving. He's trying to get Stauffenberg's trying to get through.
At one point, he's like, I'm sorry.
Stauffenberg's trying to get through to his family, and the secretary like, our lines have been cut, and he's like, all right, no, go. You need to get out of here too. And he does this really cool thing. So he opens the drawer, gets out his PPK, and he uses the edge of the desk to cock it, since he doesn't have another hand to cock it with.
I thought that was kick-ass too.
That was really cool, and that was in the trailer. So I was like, oh, that's such a cool shot. Apparently, that wasn't in the script. Tom Cruise just figured out how to do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So they're running, and there's a brief gunfight in the hallway.
Yeah, so they're trying to get General Beck out of there, and Ulbricht gets arrested. They come for Ulbricht first, and he gets arrested. He leaves, a letter for his family, and then Fromm's assistant sees them as they're moving back, and Kernheim takes back. Yeah, they have that gunfight, and Stauffenberg gets hit in his good arm.
Yep, his shooting arm.
Yeah, and they all get arrested. And Fromm's released, and he institutes a court-martial at that moment, with him in charge since the Fuhrer's not present. And they say that, and he says, Beck's under arrest and everyone else is condemned to death.
Just like all assholes, Fromm is douchey in victory.
And well, so he's also doing this to cover up that his involvement or lack there, or if not his involvement, his sort of
Complicity.
complicity. Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
And Beck
absolutely. That's exactly what's going on.
asks for a pistol for personal reasons, which I thought was all right. So I when I thought about that, it made sense because he's trying to show solidarity with the man because he's like, all right, I'm not going to leave you. Well, first they're not going to get anything out of me, and also I'm not going to leave you all to be executed, and I will live.
Wouldn't it be funny though if he's like, I have a pistol for personal reasons, and he just
then shoots from.
But I guess like we said, these German officers have their honor, and they're not going to do that. As great and poetic as that would have been. So, but in reality, of course, Beck shoots himself.
Mm-hmm. And then Remmer tells Fromm that he has orders to bring in the conspirators alive, and Fromm just sort of dismisses him, saying, "That's all, Major," or whichever rank he was.
Yeah, that'll be all. So we get a little bit of a fast forward. We see at this point someone who I didn't recognize on trial.
Yeah, so he's someone who he was probably I didn't recognize him either. I think he's someone who was probably in some of the earlier meetings, but he didn't really have a real prominent part. So you have him, and he gets executed, and then you also have this cut between when everyone who was at the War Ministry is being executed, and you have Fromm sort of watching them, from a high up perch as they're all being executed. And right before Ulbricht gets executed, Stauffenberg tells him, "Look them in the eye, make them remember."
Yeah.
And he takes.
Also, in this part, we get like an Animal House style thing where we get to see what happens to every character.
Well, by that you mean when it says they were executed.
Yeah, basically. I
Yeah,
mean,
so
spoiler alert, all of their stories end the same way. It just depends on when.
Trescow takes a grenade under his chin and lets it go off
to kill himself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have Kernham who's shot, and Felgebel was executed later. Godler was hung, and then before Stauffenberg gets called up to be to be executed, and Haften steps in front of him, and then just as a final show of loyalty to him.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah, and gets hit, and then so when Stauffenberg's going to be shot, he shouts, "Long live sacred Germany!"
Except they kind of cut him off at the end, which made it even worse.
And then it's not till after he gets shot that I realized that the person who was, announcing, to the soldiers when to shoot was Fromm's assistant.
Ooh, the spy from before?
Yeah. And then, like you were saying, they get the little thing about, saying, when everyone is executed. And then and it zooms up to Fromm, and then it says his name. It's like, oh, he got executed too. And apparently he was executed for failing to act against the conspirators.
Yeah. I guess his little plan didn't work.
Yeah. And so the movie ends with, some words before the credits saying this was the last of 15 attempts to kill Hitler.
15 known attempts.
Known attempts, excuse me. And that Nina survived the war and, only passed recently in like 2006.
And then they became a footnote of history.
Yeah.
From what I can tell, most history books don't even cover the fact that there was a time when Nazi Germany thought that Hitler was dead for like a day. Oh, also one thing we forgot to mention is that they have a little bit about the plot actually working in places like Paris.
Oh,
that
really?
That was in the movie. It wasn't in it for very long.
That's right. They briefly mentioned Paris, Prague, and I think Vienna as places where it might have worked briefly.
Yeah.
But so
that was the movie.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
So it's now time for Spy Fact versus Fiction. In order to prep for this, I read a book called Countdown to Valkryie, The July Plot to Assassinate Hitler by Nigel Jones, published by Frontline Books in London. And I provided a little bit more information in our Microdot episode. If you haven't listened to that, check it out. But here, I have quite a lot. So
all right,
here we go. Get yourself comfortable. I actually think, on the whole, this movie, Valkryie, was pretty close to the truth. more so than I think probably most of the others that we've covered so far, including Fleming.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So, but that being said, there were a couple of things that were different or just some additional information. So,
Uh-oh.
at the beginning, Stauffenberg says he was sent to Tunisia because he criticized Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
So, although he was a very prominent critic of Hitler, even before he was sent to North Africa, he kept telling his superior to stop Hitler from fighting the Soviets while there was still an army left to fight with. And even to the point where Stauffenberg was threatened with being arrested, but he didn't care. He told his friend at one point, quote, "These guys have their pants full of shit and their skulls full of straw. They don't want to do anything." He also said that Hitler is the arch enemy of Germany.
Wow.
But,
I mean, not wrong.
Yeah. But despite all this, according to Nigel, there's no evidence he was sent to Tunisia because he criticized Hitler.
So
fact,
what I have heard is,
Okay.
and this is from another podcast, and also I think the director's commentary, which also had not just the director but also the writer Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise on it, where it stated that. So he wasn't actually sent for that, but he was told by his uncle. So if you remember in the beginning, when he meets Beck for the first time, Beck says, "How's your uncle?" And he sends his regards. So Beck, so his uncle, Stauffenberg's uncle, is an influential guy, and then told Stauffenberg, you need to go to North Africa. You need to get away from Germany because they will come and arrest you.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, according to Nigel, he was moved to Tunisia was part of like a promotion process because he was actually doing such a good job. And he served as operations officer of the general staff. Then his wounds in North Africa, in the movie, he's like sitting in the car and then it blows up, right? So, in real life, however, he got shot in the eye while his hands were up to protect his face.
Oh, geez.
So the bullet like went through his right hand, causing it to be like crippled. It had to be amputated, and the fingers and his eye.
Yeesh.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I could see why they didn't need to go through all the gory details in the movie. Yeah. Isn't the movie rated PG-13?
I believe so. Let me double check.
So, okay. So meanwhile, the woman's secretary was named Marguerite von Oven, like the appliance. She worked for the War Ministry. That's all. That's all I have on her.
All right.
Then, a little bit of a mistake. On the 11th July, there was the plot that they called off because Goring and Himmler wouldn't be there.
Right.
Stauffenberg says, "Good God, shouldn't we go ahead anyway?" But they decided not to. And then July 15th was when they mobilized the reserve army and got in trouble. So the movie sort of combined those two attempts into one.
Right. So they also moved the location of that failed first attempt. Because in real life, it was actually the briefcase bomb would have taken place at Berchtesgaden rather than the Wolf's Lair. But the filmmakers decided to change that so that they had that familiarity and geography of the Wolf's Lair, so they knew what the setup was already.
Nice. So a total of 3 false alarms took place before the final attempt. Oh, I forgot to mention Operation Spark. So Operation Spark was Trescow's attempt by blowing up the plane in the beginning.
Okay.
So it pretty much went down the way the movie described it. The reason they built their bomb out of explosives that the RAF, the British Royal Air Force, had been dropping all over Europe to help resistance movements. Can't imagine why dropping explosives all over enemy territory would be considered a bad idea, but whatever. They didn't ask me. So that's what they used. And according to Nigel, historians think the reason why it failed was because they didn't test the bomb in like extreme cold conditions.
That makes sense. I was gonna say, I thought it was gonna be something about makes sense.
So Stauffenberg changed his shirt because it was sweaty, not because of the aforementioned cut. Not because of the shaving cut.
Okay.
If they had got the extra explosive, everyone would have been killed. So the bomb goes off. One man got thrown through a window but wasn't hurt, and he just got up and ran away like in a cartoon.
Wow.
So like he was sitting directly in front of a window, so no problem. bunch of people were killed, and then Hitler himself
Oh.
looked like Wile E. Coyote after one of his bombs went off, where like his clothes were like in tattered, and he had like all this soot and like debris on him, but he wasn't significantly hurt.
Damn.
Feldgebel called the conspirators, told them specifically, yes, the Fuhrer is alive. So the thing in the movie where where Ulbricht isn't sure what he said, that's not correct. Ulbricht knew that the Fuhrer was alive, but he didn't know what to do. And we didn't do anything until he heard what else was going on. Analysis of the plan is they did trigger it, but they didn't do a good job. And that's part of the problem. He actually is pretty critical of the conspirators. He's like, not only was the plan really, really risky to begin with, but they failed to kill Hitler. And then after failing to kill Hitler, they also failed to implement Valkryie correctly. They were slow. They allowed the Nazis to get ahead of them, didn't activate their units quickly enough, didn't take the radio station in Berlin, allowing the Nazis to broadcast to Hitler wasn't.
Well, maybe if Ulbricht wasn't at lunch.
But I think that's Nigel's point, is that Ulbricht didn't go to lunch. The movie, I think, sort of unfairly blames Ulbricht for the plot failing. I don't really see that being backed up according to the book. It's more like a team failure. And then aftermath. So there's still a little bit more from the movie. So Beck attempted suicide. He shot himself in the head twice, but didn't die.
Oh.
He was later executed by the SS.
Interesting.
So Stauffenberg and the people who were executed then were actually the lucky ones, because other conspirators killed themselves or were tortured by the Gestapo. Their families were initially ordered killed by Himmler under a policy of Sippenhaft. Quote, "This man is a traitor. There is bad blood in the family. The blood of traitors and the whole lot must be exterminated." That's talking about Stauffenberg. And when they had been eliminated, Himmler said they would be cremated and their ashes mixed with sewage, so no trace of them would defile the earth. And the first to suffer would be the family of the arch-traitor Stauffenberg. So then Nigel has a quote where he says, quote, "As frequently happened, even Hitler was slightly embarrassed by Himmler's crazy extremism." So, dude, when Hitler is like giving you the side eye and like the kill gesture and be like, dude, you're taking it too far. When history's greatest monster is saying that, you messed up. Something's gone wrong. But of course, Himmler was actually worse. I know that worse than Hitler is like a meme. But Himmler actually was worse than Hitler. Like a few weeks ago, I went to New York to check out the Auschwitz exhibit at the Jewish Museum. And although Hitler was the guy to like order the Holocaust, Himmler, not only did he actually carry it out, but he like volunteered to do it.
Jeez.
So he's a real piece of shit, even more than Hitler. So, but fortunately with this family thing, the Sippenhaft, they didn't go through with it.
Oh, okay.
Stauffenberg's family and the other families were just arrested and sometimes house arrested. So we already talked about Fromm. Okay, so the judge in red, the one who was yelling at that guy. So I'm surprised he was in the movie, however briefly, because he was a footnote of a footnote. So that judge's name was Roland Freisler, who Nigel describes as the ferret-faced president of Nazis' People's Court. Which I'm like, yo, why do you need to go there? Some of my best friends are ferret-faced. You don't need to make fun of his appearance, okay? So Freisler he's like a piece of shit too. So not only was he a Nazi, not only was he a hanging judge where his job was basically just to sign off on executing people who dared to criticize Nazi Germany, but he was like a dick about it. That's the worst part. According to Nigel, he liked to, quote, bawl out the condemned with vitriolic, venomous abuse. So he would like yell insults at them for like no reason. He sentenced to death many of the conspirators, including Stauffenberg's brother Berthold, who was part of it, not in the movie. At one point, Catholic lawyer Joseph Römer said, was like on trial, and Freisler said, "Soon you will be roasting in hell." And Römer bowed and said, "It will be a pleasure to welcome you there soon afterwards, Your Honor." That being said, I like the way Han Solo said it better. It was a little cleaner. So then on February 3rd, 1945, while working on one of the conspirators' court cases, the guy was named Schlabrendorf. The trial was interrupted by an air raid siren, so everyone scattered for their shelters, but Freisler realized he forgot the defendant's file. So he went back to get it, and while he was getting it, the courtroom took a direct hit from a B-17. A beam crashed down and crushed his skull immediately. So, and one person who was there was like, I guess that was God's will or something along those lines. And that is the
Wow.
Disney-esque death of Judge Roland Freisler,
I mean, yeah.
and leaving the world no poorer. So more than 7,000 people were arrested and almost 5,000 were executed in the fallout from Valkryie.
Wow.
So not all of them were connected with the plot, but a lot of them
Uh-huh.
were. The Gestapo also used the occasion to settle scores with other people suspected of
Of course.
opposition sympathies. Classic totalitarian regime move. One of the people executed was George Elser, who you may remember from the Microdot episode.
Yeah.
So he was in prison the whole war and died and was killed a year before it ended. So a 1951 survey by the Alsbach Institute revealed that only a third of respondents had a positive opinion about the men and women who had tried unsuccessfully to overthrow the Nazi regime, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. So,
however, today there are memorials to them in Germany, including a statue of a naked guy in the Bender block, which was their HQ, which I'm sure is exactly what they would have wanted.
Yeah, so a few more spy fact versus spy fiction. Apparently, so the scene where they're listening to Valkyrie, or the Ride of the Valkyries, is fictitious because apparently Salzburg actually hated Wagner.
Well, sure, that makes sense.
And also there's some stuff that Bryan Singer left out of the movie because they were like super macho moments that people would have thought because there's a moment where he's like, shouts that he doesn't want morphine when he's getting his operations, and he left. And Bryan Singer left it out because he thought that people would think that's something made up, but that's totally true. That's something that Stauffenberg did because he had a lot of these moments like this.
Real life is often stranger than fiction.
True. All right. So as a reminder to our listeners, we do our ratings from 1 to 10 martinis, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest. So Zach, what did you think?
I thought this was a really solid movie. I like how they don't really make a lot of movies like this anymore, like a mid-level, like a mid-budget movie, like not a super blockbuster, but not a super indie one anymore. I was impressed with how close it was to the true story. Thought it was really entertaining, but I will give it an 8 out of 10 martinis.
All right. And I have to think about this. I'm like at an 8.5.
All right.
As I really enjoyed. I mean, not just because it's starring Tom Cruise, one of my favorite actors, but he is he's the reason why I watched it in the first place. And then getting into the whole plot of it and just how well made the movie was, and after listening to a lot of interviews with the director and listening to with the writer, actually, Christopher McQuarrie, who did 2 of the most recent Mission Impossible movies, and listening to his commentary as well, I was just really fascinated by just how they did. And apparently this all started because McQuarrie had gone on a tour of Berlin, and his tour guide took him to the Bender block, which is where they were all executed, and told him the story. And so once he found out about it, he's like, wow, this would make a great movie. Wrote the script.
And he's right. There's a lot of really good stories that should be made into movies, and I'm glad that this one was, because it's one that people should know about. And I'm glad that they were not the footnote. I know I said before they were a footnote to history, but I'm glad they didn't stay that way. Yeah.
Alrighty, so we will be back next time. We'll let you can find out which episode we're going to be doing if you find us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at the Spy-Fi Guys.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
I've been Christian.
And I've been Zach.
And we are the Spy-Fi Guys, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Spy-Fi Guys. If you enjoyed our podcast, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. The theme song from this podcast is Mistake the Getaway by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Films, books, and television shows reviewed by our podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders, and no infringement is intended.
This is a personal podcast. Any views, statements, or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the participants. They do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the participants may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity unless explicitly stated. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.
You can find our podcast on social media at The Spy-Fi Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.